Chapter 1. The auction block. The rain had turned the cobblestones black, and Elena's bare feet slipped as the guards dragged her through the courtyard. She didn't scream. Screaming had stopped mattering 3 days ago. When her father's debts had finally come due and the creditors had sold her to settle accounts, the manor loomed ahead like a cathedral built for shadows all sharp. Gothic arches and windows that reflected nothing, not even the storm. Gargoyles leered from the roofline, their stone mouths open in silent warnings. She should have heeded when she'd first heard the name, House Corvinus. Move, one guard muttered, shoving her forward. The iron gate groaned open, and the scent hit her immediately. Old incense, candle wax, and something darker, copper, blood. Elena's pulse hammered against her ribs. She'd heard the rumors, the whispers in the market about the high houses and their hunger. But rumors were currency for the desperate, and she'd convinced herself they were nothing more than ghost stories told to frighten children. The grand hall swallowed her whole. Candles burned in iron sconces along walls, lined with tapestries depicting battles she didn't recognize, warriors with fangs, cities burning under crimson moons. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from black stone, sat a man who looked like he'd been sculpted from midnight itself. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her with eyes the color of winter storms, pale, cold, and infinitely patient. Is this the offering? His voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, low and precise. Yes, Lord Corvinus. The guard beside Elena bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched the floor. Payment for the Ashford family debt. One mortal bride as agreed. Elena's stomach turned. Bride. The word tasted like ash. The man on the throne rose in one fluid motion, and the candlelight seemed to bend around him. He was tall, impossibly tall, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and a face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so utterly devoid of warmth. He wore black on black, a long coat over a high-collared shirt, boots that made no sound as he descended the day's steps. When he stopped in front of her, Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. Look at me, he commanded softly. She already was. And what she saw made her breath catch, not in fear, though there was plenty of that, but in recognition of something she couldn't name. Grief, perhaps, or exhaustion so profound it had carved itself into the sharp lines of his face. He circled her slowly, studying her the way one might study a painting in a museum. Detached, clinical. Your name, he said. Elena? Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Elena Ashford. Elena. He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. Do you know what you are, Elena Ashford? A payment, she whispered. For debts I didn't make. Something flickered across his expression. Amusement, maybe, or pity. A payment, yes. But more specifically, you are collateral in a contract signed by your father with House Corvinus. A contract that states, in exchange for his borrowed gold, he would provide. He paused, his gaze dropping to her throat. A renewable source. Elena's blood turned to ice. Renewable source? Blood. He said it without inflection, as though discussing the weather. Your blood, to be precise. Freely given, once per lunar cycle, until the debt is satisfied. Her knees nearly buckled. You're vampire. He finished the sentence for her, his lips curving into something too sharp to be called a smile. Yes, I am Victor Corvinus, Lord of the Northern House, Keeper of the Night Court, and as of 3 days ago, your bondholder. The word bondholder made her skin crawl. I didn't agree to this. Your father did. And vampire law recognizes paternal contracts as binding. He turned away, walking back toward the throne. You will be housed here, fed, protected. In return, you will offer your blood when called upon. The terms are non-negotiable. And if I refuse? Victor stopped. Slowly, he looked back over his shoulder, and for the first time, she saw something dangerous flicker in those pale eyes. Then the contract defaults. House Corvinus claims not only your blood, but your life, and your father's, and every member of your family line, down to the youngest child. The hall seemed to shrink around her. Elena thought of her sister, barely 16, of her mother already broken by grief. I see you understand, Victor said quietly. Good. Intelligence will serve you better than defiance here. One of the guards stepped forward. Shall we take her to the east wing, my lord? No, Victor's gaze didn't leave Elena's face. She stays in the west tower, near my chambers. The guard hesitated. My lord, that's I'm aware. Victor's tone could have frozen fire. Do as I command. The guard bowed and retreated. Victor crossed the hall again, stopping close enough that Elena could see the unnatural stillness in him, the way his chest didn't rise or fall, the way his skin looked carved from marble in the candlelight. You will find your quarters adequate. There are rules you must follow. Do not enter the catacombs. Do not leave the manor grounds after sunset. And do not, he leaned closer, and she smelled rain and cold stone. Invite anyone into your chambers without my permission. Not even the servants. Why? Because, he said softly, you belong to House Corvinus now. And there are other houses that would tear you apart simply to wound me. Before she could respond, he turned and gestured to a woman who'd appeared silently in the doorway, pale, red-haired. With the same unsettling stillness Victor possessed. Celine will show you to your rooms, Victor said. We'll discuss feeding protocols tomorrow evening. And then he was gone, vanishing into the shadows at the far end of the hall, as though he'd never been there at all. Elena stood trembling in the candlelight, her bare feet cold against the stone floor, and realized with dawning horror that this wasn't a nightmare she could wake from. This was her life now. Chapter 2. The West Tower. Celine moved through the corridors like a ghost, her footsteps making no sound on the stone floors. Elena followed, her own steps echoing too loudly in the oppressive silence. The manor seemed to stretch endlessly, hallways branching into more hallways, staircases spiraling upward into darkness, doors that remained firmly shut as they passed. How long have you served him? Elena asked, desperate to break the suffocating quiet. Celine glanced back, her amber eyes unreadable. Serve is the wrong word. I am bound to House Corvinus, as you are now. Though my binding was different. You're vampire. Yes. Celine stopped before a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands. This is the West Tower. Your chambers. She produced an old key and turned it in the lock with a decisive click. Lord Victor has granted you considerable freedom within these walls. Do not mistake his generosity for weakness. The door swung open to reveal a room that stole Elena's breath, not because it was opulent, though the canopied bed and velvet curtains spoke of wealth, but because it was lived in. Books lined the shelves. A writing desk sat near the window. Fresh flowers, night blooming jasmine filled a vase on the mantel. I don't understand, Elena whispered. This looks like a guest room? Celine moved to light the candles scattered throughout the space. Lord Victor insisted. He said you were not a prisoner, despite the circumstances. Her tone suggested she disagreed with that assessment. Elena stepped inside, running her fingers along the desk's polished surface. Where is he now? The catacombs. He sleeps there during daylight hours. Celine paused at the door. A servant will bring you food shortly. You should eat. The first feeding will take more from you than you expect. When? Elena's voice cracked. 3 days. The new moon. Celine's expression softened slightly. Use the time to rest, to prepare. And Elena, she hesitated. Lord Victor is not cruel. He is ancient and bound by laws older than this kingdom, but he is not cruel. Remember that. When the fear becomes too much, then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Elena stood alone in her gilded cage, listening to the rain batter the windows. Slowly, she walked to the glass and looked out over the grounds. The manor sat atop a cliff, overlooking forests that stretched to the horizon. In the distance, she could see lights from the village where she'd grown up, so close and utterly unreachable. She pressed her palm to the cold glass and let herself cry. The knock came an hour later. Elena had curled into the window seat, wrapped in a blanket she'd found in the wardrobe, and was staring blankly at the rain when the sound startled her. Come in, she called. Expecting a servant, the door opened to reveal Victor. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a simple black shirt and trousers that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. In his hands he carried a tray with bread, cheese, fruit, and wine. You're afraid of the servants, he said, without preamble. Celine mentioned you hadn't touched the food she sent. Elena sat up straighter, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I'm not hungry. You're lying. He crossed the room and set the tray on the desk. Mortals need to eat, especially before a feeding. He poured wine into a crystal glass and held it out to her. Drink. It will help you sleep. She didn't move. Why are you here? Victor lowered the glass. Because you are my responsibility now. And because I remember what it's like the first night in a place where everything you knew has been stripped away. You remember being human? I remember being powerless. He set the glass on the windowsill beside her and stepped back, giving her space. Which is not the same thing, but close enough. Elena studied him in the candlelight. Without the throne room's theatrical shadows, he looked tired, There were faint lines around his eyes, tension in his shoulders. How old are you? 347 years. The number was incomprehensible. And you've spent all that time here. In this manner? Not all. I've spent most of it negotiating treaties between the houses, preventing wars, and cleaning up the messes made by younger vampires who think immortality excuses stupidity. He moved to the bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines. These were my sisters. The books. She loved Gothic romances and murder mysteries. Terrible taste, but it made her happy. Elena caught the past tense. Was? She took her own life 60 years ago. Victor pulled a volume from the shelf, something with a cracked leather spine and gold lettering. Vampires can die if they choose to. Sunlight, a stake through the heart, or simply walking into a bonfire and not walking out. He said it so matter-of-factly that Elena's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made her choice. He replaced the book carefully. I kept her rooms exactly as she left them, including this one. She would have liked you, I think. You don't know anything about me. I know you didn't scream when they brought you here. I know you looked me in the eye when I told you what I am. And I know you're sitting in that window calculating whether the fall would kill you or just cripple you. His pale gaze locked onto hers. It would kill you. The cliff is 200 feet of sheer rock. Elena flinched. I wasn't. Yes, you were. And I don't blame you. Victor moved toward the door. But before you make that choice, know this. The contract your father signed has a termination clause. If you survive 2 years of service to House Corvinus, you will be released with enough gold to start a new life anywhere in the kingdom. Your family's debt will be cleared. You will be free. 2 years. It felt like eternity. What if I don't survive? Elena asked quietly. Victor's hand stilled on the door handle. Then I will make sure your death is quick, and your family wants for nothing. He looked back at her, and something in his expression made her chest ache. I have taken many things in my long life, Elena Ashford. I have negotiated, conquered, and claimed. But I have never broken a promise to someone under my protection. You have my word you will leave here alive. Or you will leave here avenged. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with the wine, the books, and the impossible promise of freedom. She sat in the window seat until dawn, watching the rain, and didn't cry again. Chapter 3. In human pattern, Selena woke to silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. No birds sang. No servants bustled in the hallways. Even the rain had stopped, leaving only pale afternoon light filtering through the heavy curtains. She dressed in one of the simple gowns she'd found in the wardrobe, deep burgundy velvet that fit perfectly. Though she had no memory of anyone taking her measurements, the thought made her skin crawl. How long had they been planning this? How long had Victor known her father would default? The hallways were empty as she ventured out, following the smell of bread to what she hoped was a kitchen. Instead, she found herself in a library that made her childhood tutor's collection look like a pauper's shelf. Books climbed 3 stories high, accessible by rolling ladders and narrow galleries. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the floor in jeweled colors. And there, in a pool of shadow, far from the windows, sat Victor. He didn't look up from his book. You should be resting. I slept enough. Elena stepped closer, careful to stay in the sunlight. Why are you sitting in the dark? Because the alternative would be bursting into flames. He turned a page with careful precision. Direct sunlight is unpleasant for my kind. Elena glanced at the nearest window, where dust motes danced in golden beams. But you can be in the same room with it? Yes. We're not as fragile as the stories suggest. It's only direct exposure that kills. He finally looked up, and she noticed how the shadows under his eyes had deepened. Though it does make daytime reading rather limiting. She moved along the shelves, trailing her fingers across leather spines. Do you sleep during the day? In the catacombs, yes. When I must. Victor set his book aside. But today I stayed awake. Why? Because you're here, alone, in a house full of creatures who could kill you before you screamed. He said it so plainly that Elena's stomach dropped. Celine and the others are loyal, but hunger makes even the most controlled vampire unpredictable. I wanted to be available, should you need assistance. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. You're trying to frighten me. No, I'm trying to keep you alive. Victor stood, and she noticed how he moved too fluid, too graceful, like water flowing uphill. Come, I'll show you the rules that will govern your survival here. He led her through the manor, pointing out rooms she should avoid, the armory where ancient weapons hung on walls, The sealed chamber in the north wing where something scratched at the door from inside. The servants' quarters where the daylight staff slept and should never be disturbed after dark. Why not? Elena asked, as they passed a locked door. Because they're human, and their scent carries. If a hungry vampire catches wind of fresh blood. Victor didn't finish the sentence. The night staff are all vampires. They know better than to hunt on house grounds. But accidents happen. They descended a spiral staircase into what Victor called the public catacombs, tunnels lined with wine racks and storage chambers, lit by flickering torches. Elena noticed he moved more easily here, away from even indirect sunlight. How many vampires live here? She asked. 12, including myself. Celine is my second. The others are sworn to House Corvinus through blood oaths. Victor stopped before an iron gate. Beyond this point are the private catacombs. My chambers. You are forbidden from entering without explicit invitation. Ellen appeared through the bars into darkness that seemed to swallow the torchlight. What's down there? Things you're not ready to see. Victor's tone brooked no argument. And things that aren't ready to see you. They climbed back to the main floor, and Elena noticed something odd. Victor never touched the iron railings. His hands hovered just above them, guiding himself without contact. Iron bothers you, she said. He paused. You're observant. My father was a silversmith before he became a gambler. I learned to notice what people avoid touching. She studied him. Iron, silver, running water, are the old stories true? Some. Iron burns vampire skin. Not fatally, but painfully. Silver disrupts our healing. Victor resumed walking. Running water is merely inconvenient. It dulls our senses, makes tracking prey difficult. As for garlic and holy symbols, he smiled faintly. Superstition. They reached the great hall where Elena had first been brought. In daylight, it looked less menacing, just an old room with expensive furniture and fading tapestries. Why do you live like this? Elena asked suddenly. In this isolated manner, following ancient laws, taking blood from desperate humans. She turned to face him. You're clearly intelligent, powerful. You could do anything, be anything. Why choose this? Victor's expression went carefully blank. You think I chose this? Didn't you? I was born into House Corvinus 3 centuries ago, when these lands were still called by their old names. I became a vampire because my father was vampire, and his father before him, stretching back to the first turning. Victor's voice dropped. I became lord because my father walked into the sunrise and left me his throne. I enforced the old laws because without them, vampires would tear this kingdom apart in a feeding frenzy that would make your worst nightmares look like children's tales. Elena swallowed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. And you're right to question. Victor moved to the windows, staying just out of reach of the sunlight. The truth is, I'm tired, Elena. I have negotiated treaties with beings who see humans as cattle. I have executed my own people for breaking blood laws. I have watched everyone I ever cared about die or leave, or simply stop caring. He turned to face her. And yet I remain, because someone must. Because the alternative is chaos. The silence stretched between them, heavy with words neither could say. Finally, Elena spoke. Your sister. Did she leave because she was tired too? Victor's jaw tightened. She left because she fell in love with a human. And when he died of old age, 60 years later, she couldn't bear another century without him. Understanding crashed over Elena like cold water. That's why you kept her rooms. That's why I warn humans away. Victor's pale eyes met hers. Immortality is a cage, Elena Ashford. Don't ever wish for it. Chapter 4. Threads of Care. The new moon arrived quickly. Elena spent the 3 days exploring the manor's safe zones, reading her predecessor's books, and trying not to think about what was coming. Victor appeared each evening, always bringing food, always maintaining careful distance. They talked about books, about the kingdom's history, about everything except what would happen when the moon went dark. On the third night, Celine came to her room at sunset with a silver tray. Drink this, she said, setting down a cup filled with dark, honeyed liquid. It will help with the dizziness. Elena's hands shook as she lifted the cup. Does it hurt? The feeding? Celine sat on the edge of the bed. Not if done properly. Lord Victor has 3 centuries of practice. He knows how to make it bearable. Bearable isn't the same as painless. No, Celine admitted. But he will be gentle. More than most would be. She stood. He's waiting in his study. Don't keep him. Hunger makes even the most controlled vampire dangerous. And he's been fasting for you. The words sent ice through Elena's veins. Fasting? He hasn't fed in 2 weeks. To ensure he doesn't take too much tonight, Celine moved to the door. It's a kindness, though you might not see it that way. Elena drained the cup. It tasted of herbs and honey and something bitter underneath, and forced herself to stand. Her legs felt steady enough, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The study was on the second floor, accessible through a corridor lined with portraits of pale, beautiful people who all shared Victor's winter-storm eyes. Family, Elena realized. Generations of vampires watching her walk to her fate. She found Victor standing by the fireplace, staring into flames that cast dancing shadows across his sharp features. He'd changed into a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and Elena noticed how prominent the veins were in his forearms to visible, like his body was trying to remind him of what he lacked. You came, he said, without turning. Did I have a choice? Yes. He finally looked at her, and Elena saw the hunger there, naked and terrible, turning his eyes from pale gray to something darker. You always have a choice, Elena. You could refuse, break the contract, face the consequences, and condemn my family. Yes. Victor crossed the room to a velvet-upholstered chair positioned near the window. Sit, please. Elena obeyed, her pulse racing. How do we do this? I kneel. You offer your wrist. I drink until I've taken enough to satisfy the contract, approximately half a pint, and then I stop. Victor knelt before her, and the reversal of power made Elena's breath catch. He was ancient, deadly, capable of tearing her throat out, and yet he positioned himself below her, vulnerable. The most important rule: you must tell me if you feel faint, if the room spins, if anything feels wrong. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I'll tell you if something feels wrong. Victor took her hand with infinite care, his fingers cool against her skin. The venom in my bite has mild euphoric properties. It will feel pleasant at first. Don't let that fool you into silence. If you need me to stop. He turned her wrist upward, and Elena watched, frozen, as he pressed his lips to her pulse point, not biting yet, just feeling the rhythm of her blood. Victor, I know. His voice was rough. I know you're frightened, but I promise you, I will not take more than agreed. I will not lose control. You are safe with me. Then his fangs pierced her skin. The pain was sharp and immediate, like twin needles of ice. Elena gasped, but before she could cry out, warmth flooded through her, sweet and drowning and utterly unexpected. Her head fell back against the chair as the room softened at the edges. As the firelight blurred into something beautiful and distant, she felt Victor's hand steady her elbow, felt the gentle pull as he drank, felt her heartbeat slow to match some ancient rhythm she didn't understand. Elena, his voice came from very far away. Stay with me. She tried to focus. The room was spinning now, a lazy carousel of shadows and flame. I'm here. Look at me. She forced her eyes open and found him watching her, one hand still supporting her arm, the other pressed to the side of her neck, not feeding anymore, just holding her steady. The room is spinning, she whispered. Immediately, Victor pulled away. His fangs retracted. She saw it happen, watched them slide back into his gums like a cat's claws, and he pressed a clean cloth to her wrist. Breathe. Slowly, Elena obeyed, focusing on the steady pressure of his hands, the coolness of his skin. Gradually, the world stopped tilting. Better? Victor asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He lifted her wrist and examined the wound. 2 small punctures, already beginning to close. You did well. Better than most on their first feeding. He produced a small vial from his pocket, something dark and viscous. This will help you heal faster. May I? What is it? Vampire blood. Just a drop. It won't turn you, but it will close the wounds and restore your strength. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Victor uncorked the vial and let a single drop fall onto each puncture. The effect was immediate, warmth spreading through her veins, energy returning to her limbs. Within seconds, the wounds had sealed completely, leaving only faint pink scars. How do you feel? Victor asked. Strange. Elena flexed her fingers. Lighter. Like I could run for miles. That will fade in an hour or so. Until then, I suggest you rest. He stood, offering his hand. She took it and let him pull her to her feet. They stood close enough that she could see the color returning to his face, the hunger retreating from his eyes. Thank you, Victor said quietly. Elena blinked. For what? For trusting me. For not screaming. For... He trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. For not making this harder than it had to be. You made a promise, Elena said. You kept it. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. Yes, I did. He walked her back to the West Tower, his hand hovering near her elbow, without quite touching. At her door, he paused. Sleep well, Elena Ashford. Victor? She turned. Your sister. The one who loved a human. What was her name? Pain flickered across his face. Irina. She would have liked these rooms. The books, the flowers, the view. Elena met his gaze. I think she would have been glad you kept them for someone who needed them. For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, thank you. He was gone before she could reply. Chapter 5. The hunters at the Gothic attack came 6 days after the first feeding. Elena woke to the sound of shattering glass and Celine's voice screaming orders in the corridor. She stumbled from bed, still tangled in sheets, as the door burst open and Victor appeared, shirt torn, blood streaking his jaw. Get dressed, now. He didn't wait for questions. Already moving to the wardrobe and pulling out a heavy cloak. We have minutes, maybe less. What's happening? Elena's hands shook as she pulled on a day dress over her nightgown. House Draven. Victor fastened the cloak around her shoulders. They've breached the east wall. 30 vampires, maybe more. They're here for you. The words didn't make sense. Me? Why would they? Because you're bonded to House Corvinus. Because taking you would humiliate me and weaken my position in the Night Court. Victor grabbed her hand and pulled her into the hallway. Because vampire politics are built on blood and petty vengeance. And you're caught in the crossfire. They ran through corridors Elena had never seen, descending narrow servant staircases while the sounds of battle echoed from the main hall. She heard screaming human and inhuman and the wet sound of something tearing. Where are we going? She gasped. The catacombs. There's a passage that leads to the forest. Victor yanked open a hidden door behind a tapestry. Celine will hold them as long as she can, but we need to be gone before an explosion rocked the manor. Stone dust rained from the ceiling, and Elena stumbled. Victor caught her, his arms steel around her waist. Keep moving. They plunged into darkness. Victor produced a torch from somewhere, and in its flickering light, Elena saw they were in the private catacombs, the ones he'd forbidden her to enter. The walls here were older, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Behind them, footsteps echoed. They're following, Elena whispered. I know. Victor pulled her into a side chamber. Stay here. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Where are you? He pressed a finger to her lips. Trust me. Then he was gone, vanishing into the shadows with that impossible vampire speed. Elena crouched in the dark, her heart hammering so loud she was certain it would give her away. The footsteps grew closer. She could hear breathing, ragged, excited, hungry. A figure appeared in the torchlight. Male, young-looking, with eyes like burning coals and a smile that was all fangs. I can smell you, little human, he crooned. Sweet, untouched. Corvinus always did have excellent taste. Elena pressed herself against the wall, searching desperately for a weapon. Her fingers closed around a loose stone. The vampire stepped into the chamber. Come now. I'll make it quick. Well, he laughed. Relatively quick. Elena threw the stone. It caught him in the temple, not hard enough to do real damage, but enough to surprise him. In that split second of distraction, Victor materialized behind the intruder, grabbed his head, and twisted. The sound of snapping bone echoed through the catacombs. The body dropped, and Victor stood over it, breathing hard, covered in more blood than before. I told you not to make a sound. He was going to kill me. Yes, and now his friends know exactly where we are. Victor grabbed her hand again. Run. They fled deeper into the catacombs, past chambers filled with coffins and old weapons and things Elena didn't want to examine too closely. Behind them, she heard shouts, more vampires closing in. How many are there? She gasped. Too many. Victor pulled her around a corner, and suddenly they were in a vast underground chamber. A river ran through it, black and fast-moving, disappearing into a tunnel barely wide enough for a person. Can you swim? Elena stared at the water in horror. In that, I'll drown. You'll definitely die if you stay here. Victor was already stripping off his torn jacket. The current will carry you through the mountain and deposit you near the village. Follow the north road and find the church. Tell Father Marcus that Victor Corvinus sent you. He'll keep you safe until, what about you? Victor met her eyes, and Elena saw the truth there before he spoke. I'm staying. Someone has to hold them long enough for you to escape. No, Elena grabbed his arm. No, You can't, there are too many, Elena. He took her face in his hands, and his touch was surprisingly gentle. This is not a negotiation. You are my responsibility, my bondholder, and I will not let House Draven take you. Then come with me. I can't. If I run, they'll hunt us both. But if I fight, he smiled grimly. I can buy you time. Footsteps echoed in the tunnels. Closer now. Victor, please, he kissed her forehead, quick, chaste, devastating. The contract is void if I die. You'll be free. No debt, no bond. Take the freedom and don't look back. Then he shoved her toward the river. Elena fell, the black water swallowing her whole. The current seized her immediately, dragging her into the tunnel. She surfaced once, gasping, and saw Victor standing at the edge of the chamber, silhouetted against torchlight as shadows closed in around him. Then the tunnel took her, and she was tumbling through absolute darkness, choking on water that tasted of stone and earth, her lungs burning, her hands scrabbling uselessly at slick rock walls. The river spat her out into moonlight and shallow rapids. Elena dragged herself onto the bank, coughing water, shaking violently. She could see the village lights in the distance, exactly where Victor had said they'd be. Behind her, back toward the mountain, she heard nothing. No screams, no sounds of battle, just silence. Elena knelt in the mud, Victor's cloak heavy around her shoulders, and made a choice. She stood, turned away from the village, and started running back toward the manor. Damn you, Victor Corvinus, she whispered. I'm not leaving you to die. She had no weapons, no plan, no chance of survival, but she ran anyway, because somewhere in the past 6 days, between the feedings and the conversations and the careful kindness, she'd stopped thinking of him as a monster, and she refused to let him face the monsters alone. Chapter 6. Blood and Revelation. Elena found a servant's entrance on the north side of the manor, a small door hidden behind overgrown ivy that hung loose on its hinges. She slipped inside, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, and immediately smelled smoke. The hallways were carnage, bodies lay scattered across marble floors, some vampire, some human servants who'd been caught in the crossfire. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting nausea, and forced herself to move forward. She needed a weapon, anything. The armory Victor had warned her about was 2 floors up. Elena climbed the servants' staircase, keeping to the shadows, her bare feet silent on stone. Somewhere in the distance, she heard fighting, the clash of metal, inhuman snarling, a scream cut short. The armory door had been blown off its hinges. Inside, weapons gleamed in the firelight from the burning tapestries, swords, daggers, crossbows, things Elena had no name for. She grabbed a short blade that felt balanced in her hand, and a longer dagger for her boot. Then she heard Victor's voice, ragged with pain. Enough, Casimir. You've made your point. Elena ran toward the sound. The great hall had become a battlefield. Furniture lay in splinters. The ancient tapestries burned. And in the center of it all, Victor knelt on the floor, surrounded by 6 vampires wearing the crimson and black of House Draven. He was wounded badly. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and blood soaked his shirt from wounds Elena couldn't see. But his eyes still burned with defiance. The vampire, who must be Casimir, circled him slowly, tall, silver-haired, with a smile like a knife wound. 300 years, Victor. 300 years you've sat on your throne, dictating laws to the rest of us, playing the noble lord while we starve on your restrictions. The blood laws exist to prevent. Victor's words ended in a grunt of pain as one of the other vampires kicked him in the ribs. To prevent us from claiming what is rightfully ours. Casimir crouched before Victor, grabbing his jaw. Humans are cattle, old friend. Prey, not pets to be coddled with feeding contracts and consent protocols. You've grown soft, then kill me and be done with it. Victor spat blood. But leave my people alone. Oh, I will kill you. But first, Casimir glanced toward the doorway where Elena stood frozen. First, I think I'll have dessert. Every vampire in the room turned to look at her. Elena's grip tightened on the dagger. Touch him again and Casimir laughed. You'll what? Poke me with your little knife? He stood, releasing Victor. How delicious. The human thinks she's a hero. Victor's eyes met Elena's, and she saw fury there, not at Casimir, but at her. Run, he rasped. Elena, run. She didn't run. Instead, she did something that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. She dragged the blade across her own palm, deep enough to bleed freely, and held it up. The effect was instantaneous. Every vampire in the room went utterly still. their eyes fixed on the blood dripping from her hand. The air became thick with tension, with hunger barely leashed. "Here's what's going to happen," Elena said, her voice shaking but determined. "You're going to let Victor go. All of you. Or I'm going to paint these walls with my blood, and you're going to go into a feeding frenzy that will get half of you killed fighting each other." Casimir's smile vanished. "You stupid girl. You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." Elena took a step forward, letting more blood fall. "I've been reading Victor's sister's books. She loved vampire histories. Did you know that fresh human blood in an enclosed space can drive even ancient vampires to madness? That you'll turn on each other like animals?" "Elena, stop." Victor tried to stand and collapsed. "Shut up," she snapped, not taking her eyes off Casimir. "You had your chance to be noble. Now it's my turn." She held her bleeding hand over a burning tapestry. "One more step toward him, and I drop this blood on the flames. The heat will aerosolize it. You'll be breathing it in seconds." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then one of the younger vampires, a female with wild eyes, lunged. Elena dropped her blood onto the fire. The room exploded into chaos. Vampires screamed, fighting each other in their frenzy to reach the source of the scent. Casimir tried to maintain control, but even he stumbled, his fangs extending involuntarily. Elena dove toward Victor, grabbed his good arm, and hauled him toward the door with strength she didn't know she possessed. "You insane, reckless," Victor was saying, but she cut him off. "Save it. Can you walk?" "Not well." "Then lean on me." They staggered through the corridors, while behind them, House Draven tore itself apart. Elena could hear Casimir roaring orders, trying to restore discipline, but the damage was done. She'd bought them time. They made it to the West Tower before Victor's legs gave out completely. Elena lowered him to the floor, breathing hard, her palms still bleeding freely. "Let me see your wounds," she said. "Elena, let me see them." Victor's shirt was shredded. Beneath it, Elena saw deep gashes that would have killed a human instantly, claw marks that had torn through muscle and scraped bone. They were already healing, but slowly. Too slowly. "You need blood," she realized. "No, I won't." The contract doesn't matter if you're dead." Elena thrust her bleeding palm toward his face. "Drink, now." Victor's control was magnificent. Even wounded, even starving, he hesitated. "Elena, if I start, I might not stop. The hunger after battle, it's different, stronger. Then I'll stop you." She pressed her palm to his lips. "Trust me the way I trusted you." His resistance crumbled. Victor's mouth closed over her wound, and Elena gasped as the sensation flooded through her, not the gentle, controlled feeding from before, but something desperate and raw. She felt his fangs pierce her palm deeper, felt the pull of her blood leaving her body in urgent gulps. The room began to spin. "Victor?" she whispered. He didn't stop. "Victor." She grabbed his hair, yanked hard. "Enough." He released her with a strangled sound, his eyes wild. For a heartbeat, Elena saw the monster everyone feared, ancient, hungry, capable of terrible violence. Then he blinked, and Victor returned. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I'm so sorry you stopped." Elena wrapped her hand in a torn piece of his shirt, her vision swimming. "You stopped when I asked." Victor stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. Chapter 7. The aftermath. Dawn found them in the West Tower, surrounded by silence that felt more ominous than the battle had been. Victor sat against the wall, his wounds mostly healed, now, watching Elena sleep in the chair she'd refused to leave. She'd passed out from blood loss an hour ago, and he'd carried her to the seat, wrapped her in blankets, tended her wounded hand with his own blood, just a drop, to help her heal faster. She'd saved his life. The thought still didn't feel real. In 3 centuries, Victor had fought wars, negotiated impossible treaties, survived assassination attempts by enemies far more sophisticated than Casimir's crude assault. But he'd never had someone run toward danger for him, never had someone offer their own blood to keep him alive. Celine appeared in the doorway, bloodied but intact. "The grounds are secure." House Draven retreated at dawn. "We lost 3 vampires and 1 human servant." Victor closed his eyes. "Casualties on their side? 7 dead, 3 wounded badly enough that they won't recover." "Casimir escaped." Celine's gaze shifted to Elena. "She shouldn't have survived what she did. The blood loss alone, I know. Yet she's breathing, healing." Celine stepped closer, studying Elena's sleeping face. "You gave her your blood, more than a drop." "It wasn't a question." Victor didn't answer. "My lord, you know what that means." "The bond, I know what it means." Victor said quietly. And I had no choice. She was dying because of me, because I let her come back, because I didn't protect her well enough. Celine knelt beside him. She came back by her own choice, against your orders, and she used her own blood as a weapon. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Irina would have loved her. The words hit harder than they should have. Victor looked at Elena, her dark hair tangled, her face pale, her bandaged hand resting on her lap. She looked fragile in sleep, but he knew better now. She was iron wrapped in silk. What do we do now? Celine asked. We fortify. Casimir will be back, and he'll bring more than 30 vampires next time. Victor stood carefully, testing his healing wounds. Contact the other houses. Tell them House Draven has broken the accords by attacking a bondholder. The Night Court will have to respond. And her? Celine gestured to Elena. Victor was silent for a long moment. She can't stay here. It's not safe anymore. Where will you send her? I don't know yet. Somewhere Casimir can't reach. Somewhere she can have the life she deserves. He moved to the window, watching sunrise paint the destroyed gardens in gold. The contract is void. I'm releasing her from service. Does she know that? She will when she wakes. Celine stood. You're making a mistake, my lord. I'm keeping her alive. No, you're pushing away the first person in 60 years who's seen you as something other than a monster or a political asset. Celine moved toward the door. Irina died because she loved someone who couldn't stay with her forever. Are you going to make the same mistake by sending away someone who chose to stay? She left before Victor could respond. Ellen awoke to the smell of breakfast and Victor sitting in the window seat reading. Pale morning light illuminated his profile, and she noticed the bruises were gone, the wounds healed. He looked almost human, like this tired, thoughtful, reading glasses perched on his nose. You wear glasses? The words came out rough. Victor glanced up. Only for reading. A consequence of being turned young, my eyes never fully matured. He set the book aside. How do you feel? Like I lost a fight with a river. Elena sat up slowly. Her hand throbbed, but when she unwrapped the bandage she found the wound mostly healed, just a thin pink line across her palm. You gave me more of your blood. You were dying. That's becoming a pattern with us. Elena flexed her fingers, testing. Did they retreat? House Draven. At dawn. They'll be back. Victor removed his glasses and tucked them away. Which is why you need to leave. The words landed like stones. What? The contract between us is dissolved. Your father's debt is cleared. I'm arranging transport to take you anywhere in the kingdom, somewhere Casimir can't find you. You'll have enough gold to start fresh. Buy a shop. Marry well if you choose. Victor's voice was carefully neutral. You're free, Elena. She should have felt relief, joy. Instead, all she felt was a cold, creeping anger. You're sending me away. I'm keeping you safe, without asking what I want. Elena stood, ignoring the dizziness. I risked my life to save you. I bled for you. And now you're just dismissing me? Like a servant whose contract is up. Victor's jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. You want to stay in a house that will be under siege within the week? You want to be hunted by vampires who see you as a tool to hurt me? You want to watch people die defending you? Victor rose, and she saw the strain in every line of his body. You want to be bound to me, to this cursed existence, when you could have freedom? I want a choice. Elena's voice cracked. For once in my life, I want someone to ask me what I want instead of deciding for me. My father sold me. You bought me. House Draven tried to take me, and now you're sending me away. Does anyone care what I actually want? The silence that followed was deafening. Victor stared at her, something breaking in his expression. What do you want, Elena? I want to understand what's happening between us. She stepped closer. I want to know why your blood healed me faster than it should. I want to know why I could feel you dying in the Great Hall. Why I ran back when every instinct told me to run away. She faltered. I want to know if what I'm feeling is real, or just some vampire magic making me stupid. Victor's expression softened. There's no magic. What you're feeling. He took a careful breath. When a vampire gives their blood to a human repeatedly, it creates a connection. Not control, you're still fully yourself, but awareness. You'll sense when I'm in danger, when I'm feeding, when I'm close. Elena's heart stuttered. How close are we talking? Within 100 feet or so, maybe more, as the bond strengthens. And you? What do you sense from me? Victor looked away. Everything. Your fear, your determination, your heartbeat, even when your floor's away. His voice dropped. Your loneliness, your hope, Your anger at being sent away. Then you know I don't want to go. Knowing what you want and giving it to you are different things. Victor moved toward the door. Rest. We'll discuss this tonight. Victor, he paused, his hand on the doorframe. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for asking. Finally, he nodded without turning and disappeared into the hallway, leaving Elena alone with the sunrise and the impossible choice she knew she'd already made. Chapter 8. Quiet nights and old Relesthi. The next week passed in strange, suspended peace. House. Draven didn't attack again, not yet. Victor sent envoys to the night court, calling for a formal tribunal. Celine doubled the guard rotations, and Elena found herself settling into a rhythm she'd never expected. Mornings reading in the library, afternoons walking the fortified gardens, evenings with Victor. He taught her vampire history in fragments, telling stories while they sat by the fire in his study. She learned about the first turning, how the eldest vampires had been created by ancient magic now lost to time, about the houses and their territories, carved from centuries of war and treaty, about the blood laws that govern everything from feeding to turning to killing. Why is consent so important? Elena asked one night, curled in the chair across from him. To your kind, I mean. You're stronger, faster. You could just take what you need. Victor set down his wine glass. Because we remember being powerless. Every vampire was human, once vulnerable, mortal, subject to forces beyond our control. He stared into the fire. The laws exist because without them, we become the monsters humans already think we are. Elena watched the firelight play across his features. Is that why you enforce them so strictly? The feeding contracts, the consent protocols? Yes, and because I've seen what happens when we don't. Victor's voice went distant. 200 years ago, a vampire lord named Dragon decided the laws were inconvenient. He let his house feed freely, turning humans without permission, leaving bodies in the streets. Within a month, the humans rose up. They burned 3 vampire houses to ash, killed hundreds of us. The night court had to execute Dragon publicly to prevent full-scale war. You were there. I carried out the execution. Victor met her eyes. I drove the stake myself. Because the alternative was watching more of my people burn. Elena processed this. You've killed your own kind to protect humans. I've killed my own kind to protect both our kinds. We need each other more than most vampires want to admit. He stood, moving to refill his glass. Humans provide blood. We provide protection from things worse than us. It's a balance. Casimir wants to tip it. What things are worse than vampires? Victor smiled grimly. You don't want to know. Trust me. Over the following nights, Elena began teaching Victor in return. Small things: how to laugh without looking like he was calculating something, how to appreciate sunrise through her eyes. She'd wake before dawn and describe the colors to him, how to understand the rhythms of mortal life he'd forgotten centuries ago. What do humans do for hope? He asked one evening, the question so unexpected it made Elena pause. What do you mean? When everything seems impossible? When the future looks like nothing but struggle and loss? How do mortals find hope? Victor leaned forward, genuinely curious. I've lived 300 years. I know persistence, strategy, survival. But hope? I think I forgot what that feels like. Elena thought about her father's debts, her mother's grief, the moment she'd been sold. We tell ourselves stories. That tomorrow might be better. That someone might see us. That love exists, even when we can't find it. She met his gaze. We hope, because the alternative is unbearable, and when the stories don't come true, we tell new ones. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then, you give me hope, Elena Ashford. I'm not sure what to do with it. The confession hung between them, intimate and terrifying. On the 8th night, Victor found Elena in the library after midnight, surrounded by books about vampire lore. You're reading house histories, he observed. I'm trying to understand what we're up against. Elena gestured to the scattered volumes. Casimir's family has controlled House Draven for 5 generations. They believe vampires should rule humans openly, not hide in treaties and contracts. He's been challenging your authority for decades. You've been studying. I'm invested now. Elena closed the book. If I'm staying, and I am staying, no matter what you decide, I need to understand the politics. Victor sat across from her, candlelight casting shadows under his eyes. You shouldn't stay. The night court tribunal will take weeks. Casimir will attack again before they rule. You'll be in constant danger. I've been in danger since my father sold me. At least here, I'm in danger for something that matters. Elena leaned forward. Tell me about the blood bond. The real truth, not the sanitized version. Victor's expression shuddered. Elena, you said it creates awareness. But there's more, isn't there? I've been reading Irina's journals. She wrote about bonds, about what happens when a vampire gives their blood to the same human repeatedly. You found her private journals? She left them for someone who needed them. Someone like me. Elena held his gaze. Tell me what the bond really means. Victor was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, it means I feel your emotions as if they were my own. It means your heartbeat synchronizes with mine when we're close. It means if you're hurt, I'll know it, not just sense it, but feel your pain. He paused. And it means that over time, if we're not careful, the bond could deepen into something permanent. Permanent how? A true blood bond, unbreakable. You would feel everything I feel, the hunger, the loneliness, the weight of immortality. And I would be tied to your mortality, counting down your years like a clock. I can't stop. Victor's voice was raw. Irina bonded with her human. She felt every moment of his aging, his weakening. When he died, it nearly destroyed her. Elena's chest tightened. That's why she walked into the sunrise. Yes, the pain of losing him was too much. The bond made it unbearable. Victor stood abruptly. Which is why I can't let this continue. Why? You need to leave before what? Before you care too much. Before I do? Elena rose to face him. Victor, I think we're already past that point. We're not. You gave me your blood 3 times. You told me that creates the bond. It can be broken. If we stop now, if you leave, the connection will fade within a month. And if I don't want it to fade? Victor stared at her, something desperate in his eyes. Don't do this, Elena. Don't choose this. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. She stepped closer. Stop protecting me from the truth and show me what you're so afraid of. For a heartbeat, she thought he would refuse. Then Victor took her hand, the one with the scar from her blood weapon, and pressed it over his heart. Nothing happened at first. Then Elena felt it, a pulse beneath her palm. Slow, steady, and beneath that, an ache so profound it stole her breath. Loneliness that spanned centuries. Grief for everyone he'd lost. Fear that he would lose her too. And underneath it all, hope, fragile and new and terrifying. This is what I feel, Victor whispered. Every night, every century. This is what the bond would tie you to. Elena didn't pull away. And this, she guided his hand to her own heart, letting him feel her pulse race. Is what I feel. Fear, yes. But also certainty. Also choice. Also, she swallowed hard. Also something I'm too afraid to name. They stood like that, hands over each other's hearts. The bond humming between them like a violin string pulled taut. We should stop, Victor said. But he didn't move. We should, Elena agreed, and didn't step away. Chapter 9. The second Seagoth attack came 3 nights later, and this time, Casimir brought an army. Elena woke to the sound of iron gates shattering and Victor's voice in her mind, not words exactly, but a pulse of warning through the bond that made her heart lurch. She threw on the leather armor Celine had insisted she keep by the bed and grabbed the silver dagger Victor had given her 2 days ago. For close quarters only, he'd said. And only if you have no other choice. The manor shook as something massive struck the outer wall. Elena ran to the window and saw them, at least 50 vampires, maybe more, pouring through the breached gates like a dark tide. They wore Draven crimson, but she recognized colors from other houses, too. Casimir had built a coalition. The door burst open. Celine stood there, blood already streaking her face. We're evacuating the West Wing. Victor's orders. Come now. Where is he? The main hall, holding the line with what's left of our guard. Celine grabbed Elena's arm. We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the interior defenses. The escape tunnel. I'm not running again. Elena, this isn't like last time. There are too many. Even Victor can't. An explosion rocked the tower. The window shattered inward, and a vampire came through the opening, young female, grinning with bloodlust. She landed in a crouch between Elena and the door. Celine moved like lightning, but the vampire was faster. She caught Celine's throat and slammed her into the wall hard enough to crack stone. Elena didn't think. She drove her dagger into the vampire's back. Silver burned through undead flesh like acid. The vampire screamed and released Celine, whirling on Elena with fury in her eyes. You little. Celine ripped her head off before she could finish the sentence. Good instinct, Celine gasped, retrieving her sword from the floor. Bad target. Next time, aim for the heart. They ran. The manor had become a war zone. Bodies littered the hallways, vampire and human alike. Elena tried not to look too closely at the faces. Tried not to think about the servants she'd shared meals with. The guards who'd nodded respectfully when she passed. They reached the main hall to find Victor fighting like something from a nightmare. He moved too fast to follow. His blade finding throats and hearts with surgical precision. 5 bodies already lay at his feet. But Elena could see the strain the way his movements were fractionally slower than they should be. The blood soaking his clothes from wounds that weren't healing fast enough. The bond pulsed with his pain. His exhaustion, his grim determination to protect what was his. Casimir stood at the far end of the hall, watching with a smile. You're outnumbered, old friend. Surrender the human, abdicate your position, and I'll let your people live. Counter offer, Victor said calmly, decapitating another attacker. You leave now, and I'll make your death quick when the night court sentences you. The night court is corrupt. Half the houses support my claim. Casimir gestured, and 10 more vampires moved forward. Last chance, Victor. The girl dies either way. Question is whether your house dies with her. Elena felt Victor's spike of rage through the bond. Felt him preparing to fight to the death, to take as many down as he could before they overwhelmed him. She made a decision. Stop. Elena stepped forward, and every vampire in the room turned to look at her. I'll come with you, willingly. Just let them go. All of them. No, Victor's voice was ice. Elena, don't. Lord Corvinus can't negotiate for my surrender. Elena continued, ignoring him. But I can negotiate for myself. That's vampire law, isn't it? Bondholders retain autonomy in matters of their own fate. Casimir's eyebrows rose. Someone's been studying. Yes, that's technically correct. Then I invoke that right. I'll surrender to House Draven in exchange for the safe passage of everyone in House Corvinus, including Victor. Elena forced her voice steady. Do we have terms? Elena, no. Victor started forward, but 3 vampires blocked his path. Casimir smiled slowly. Fascinating. The pet has teeth. He walked toward her, and Elena forced herself not to retreat. But you're forgetting something, little human. I don't need your cooperation. I just need you dead. Your death humiliates Victor just as effectively as your capture. He reached for her throat, and Victor moved faster than Elena had ever seen him move. One moment he was across the hall, blocked by enemies. The next, he was between Elena and Casimir, his hand wrapped around the other vampire's wrist with enough force to crack bone. You want to humiliate me? Victor's voice was nothing human. Then face me yourself. Or are you too much of a coward to fight without your army? The hall went silent. Casimir's smile vanished. You challenge me? Here? Now? Blood duel. Ancient right. Winner takes all. The human, the houses, everything. Victor released Casimir's wrist and stepped back. Unless you're afraid. Elena's stomach dropped. She knew what Victor was doing, buying time. Maybe buying her life. But a blood duel meant fight to the death. No quarter. No surrender. Casimir's eyes gleamed. Accepted. But when I win, I'm turning the girl. Making her watch as I tear apart everything you've built. Making her immortal so she can suffer for centuries knowing she's the reason House Corvinus fell. You won't win, Victor said quietly. We'll see. The vampires formed a circle. Ancient ritual taking over. Celine appeared at Elena's side, pulling her back to the edge of the ring. Can he win? Elena whispered. I don't know. Celine's voice was tight. Casimir is younger, faster. Victor is wounded, exhausted. But Victor has 3 centuries of experience. And rage that could burn mountains. The combatants circled each other. Elena felt the bond thrumming between them, Victor's grim determination, his fear for her, and underneath it all, something that felt dangerously close to love. Don't die, she thought desperately. Please don't die for me. Through the bond, she felt his response, not words, but a promise. A vow that he would fight until his last breath to keep her safe. Then Casimir struck, and the hall exploded into violence. Blades clashed with sounds like thunder. Victor parried, riposted, moved with brutal efficiency. But Casimir was relentless, pressing his advantage, forcing Victor back step by step. Elena watched in horror as Victor's defenses began to crack. As too much blood stained the marble floor, she felt his pain spike through the bond, felt his strength failing, and knew with terrible certainty that he was going to lose. Chapter 10. Blood Oath and Dawn. Victor fell to one knee. Casimir's blade buried in his shoulder, Elena felt the pain tear through the bond white-hot agony that drove her to her knees as well. Around them, the vampires roared, sensing the end. Casimir twisted the blade, and Victor's scream echoed through the hall. Any last words, old friend? Casimir leaned close, triumph in his eyes. Victor's gaze found Elena across the circle. Through the bond, she felt everything: his regret, his love, his desperate wish that she'd run when she had the chance. And suddenly, Elena understood. The bond didn't just flow one way. If she could feel his pain, his emotions, then maybe she closed her eyes and pushed every ounce of strength she had through the connection. Her hope, her fury, her absolute refusal to watch him die. Get up, she commanded. Get up and fight. Victor's eyes widened. Through the bond, she felt her strength flowing into him like water into a dry well, not physical power, but something deeper. Human resilience, mortal determination, the stubborn hope that had kept her alive through her father's betrayal, through being sold, through everything. Victor surged upward. His hand caught Casimir's throat. Before the other vampire could react, Victor ripped the blade from his own shoulder and drove it through Casimir's heart. Casimir's eyes went wide with shock. Impossible, she's not just my bondholder, Victor said quietly. She's my bondmate, and you just learned the difference. Casimir crumbled to ash. The hall erupted in chaos. Draven's vampires stood frozen, their leader dead, their coalition shattered. Victor turned to face them, bloodied but unbroken. Anyone else want to challenge House Corvinus? His voice carried absolute authority. Or shall we discuss terms of surrender? One by one, the vampires knelt. Dawn was breaking when Elena finally made it back to the West Tower. Victor had spent the past hour negotiating surrender terms, accepting oaths of fealty from Draven's vampires, and sending messengers to the Night Court. Celine had insisted Elena rest, but she couldn't nod until she saw Victor alone. He appeared in her doorway as the first rays of sun touched the horizon. You should be in the catacombs, Elena said. The light, I have a few minutes. Victor closed the door behind him. He'd cleaned the blood from his face, changed clothes, but she could still see the exhaustion in every line of his body. We need to talk. About what happened. About the bond? Elena stood. Victor, I felt your strength failing. I couldn't let you die. I know. And what you did, what we did, it changed everything. Victor crossed to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. A true bond, unbreakable. You felt it form, didn't you? Elena nodded. Even now, she could sense his exhaustion, his relief, his fear of what came next. It means we're connected for life. Your life, Victor clarified. You'll age normally, live a mortal span, but I'll feel every year, every change. And when you die, his voice broke. I'll feel that too. Like Irina, yes. Except I won't be able to walk into the sunrise afterward. The Night Court will need me. The houses will need stability. Victor took her hands. Elena, I should never have let it go this far. I should have sent you away when I had the chance. Now you're bound to me, and I've condemned you to stop. Elena squeezed his hands. I chose this. Every step of the way. I came back when you told me to run. I gave you my blood. I pushed my strength through the bond. She met his eyes. I chose you, Victor. And I'd choose you again. You don't understand what you're giving up. A normal life. A human husband. Children. Growing old with someone who can grow old with you. I understand perfectly. Elena stepped closer. I'm giving up a life of maybe finding someone who tolerates me. Maybe settling for comfortable. Maybe being safe. She touched his face. And I'm choosing a life where someone sees me. Where I matter. Where every moment counts. Because I know exactly how precious time is. Victor closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. Elena smiled. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to teach me everything about vampire politics, house law, and how to survive in your world. I'm going to live my mortal life as your partner, not your pet, not your possession. When my time comes, you're going to honor my memory by continuing to be the vampire who fights for both our kinds. And if I can't bear losing you, then you'll bear it anyway. Because that's what you do. You endure. You survive. You keep the balance. Elena's voice softened. And you'll remember that I chose this life with you freely. That every moment we had was worth the pain at the end. Victor pulled her close, his arms steel around her. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I've loved you since you threw a stone at that vampire in the catacombs. Since you weaponized your own blood to save me. Since you looked at a monster and saw something worth saving. I love you too, Elena said. Even though you're dramatically brooding and have terrible timing and tried to send me away for my own good. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was beautiful. They stood in the growing dawn light, holding each other while the sun rose over the manor. Victor's skin began to smoke where the light touched it, and he pulled reluctantly away. I have to go. The catacombs, I know. Elena walked him to the door. Tonight we plan. Tomorrow we rebuild. Victor paused at the threshold. And for however many tomorrows you have, I will make sure you never regret choosing me. I already don't. He kissed her, then soft and careful and full of promise. When he pulled away, his eyes held something Elena had never seen before. Hope. Sleep well. Elena Ashford. Sleep well. Victor Corvinus. She watched him disappear into the shadows of the corridor, feeling the bond hum between them even as distance grew. In the weeks to come, they would face the night court, restructure the houses, and navigate the complicated politics of a human bondmate to a vampire lord. But for now, Elena stood in her tower room, no longer a prisoner, no longer just a payment for debt, and watched the sunrise she'd once thought she'd never see again. She was bonded to darkness, yes, but she'd chosen it with her eyes wide open, and that made all the difference. The end.